the big breaking news, as you see probably across your phone or wherever you're watching the news, Israel and Hamas have reached a hostage/ceasefire deal. That is where Israeli hostages and some Palestinian prisoners will be released in trade, if you will, in an initial 6-week phase of ceasefire. And of course, the thought process hopefully is that if Hamas sticks to that 6-week ceasefire, and Israel as well, but if Hamas does, because typically they're the ones that do not, that this could be ongoing and this could be the path truly to the end of the war. Now, as we know, historically, that is not probably the end of the war in the big picture sense, but the end of this specific moment. Obviously, this comes from President Trump taking office next week. He put out a statement saying, we have a deal. And this is a big emotional moment for a lot of us. And look, I know that there's going to be mixed reaction from a lot of people, Jeff, because sometimes it feels like these ceasefire deals certainly more favor Hamas in this situation. However, I'm looking at the streets right now in Tel Aviv, live coverage, and there's celebrations happening in the streets because no one wants wartime in their country. People want to be able to return back to normal life in some ways. They want to be able to bring tourists back to Israel in a way that's dramatic, and they want to be able to bring all the flights back and everything to return to some sense of normalcy. But as someone who is so deeply involved in this, I obviously wanted to hear from you, your thoughts on this, and we'll go down some of the details that we expect to be coming.
Sure. Well, I think that the reaction that you're seeing has less to do with an end of a war and more to do with the return of hostages. And I don't know that this war is going to end anytime soon. I think that the ceasefire, even, the agreement they have in Lebanon, Israel still is waging an on and off war in Lebanon because Lebanon keeps on, Hezbollah keeps on breaching this ceasefire and Israel has to keep on going in. And so the good news is that Israel is, I'm sure, going to retain its rights to operate and keep on fighting against those inevitable ceasefire breaks. Remember, there was a ceasefire on October 6th that was broken on October 7th last year. And so we're dealing with terrorist organizations. Obviously, they're not to be trusted at all. Their highest morality is murdering Israelis and Jews. Now, what we are hearing, though, is, and again, it's, as usual, when Israel makes these deals, they get back one living or dead citizen for dozens of actual terrorists, barbaric jihadist terrorists. And those are the same people who launched this last attack on October 7th. And so, what's happening here is that Donald Trump is coming in and the entire calculus changes for the bad guys. And when I say the bad guys, not just talking about Hamas, not just talking about Hezbollah, but we're talking about Iran, who has been funding this up, has been leading the charge here. And what I think there's hope for, this is not, I'm talking about what's going on in the streets. In the streets, I think is genuine rejoicing at the possibility of seeing some hostages come home alive and not as much rejoicing, but even getting the bodies of the dead ones and getting clarity. But is the hopes that this leaves open the possibility for real regime change in Iran, for taking out Iran's nuclear ambitions once and for all times, and that all things hopefully will be left on the table for Israel with a true ally in the White House.
Absolutely. And some of the deal points that have come out, at least allegedly, and these are again speculation, but they're expected, is a 6-week pause on the fighting in Gaza. And then hopefully, if that stays true, which again, as you said, is sad to say, but feels unlikely, but let's say it is, then there will be a talks of another phase that could lead to an end of the war entirely, and that's expected to begin negotiations during that 6-week time. Phased release of hostages and Palestinian prisoners. Hamas will release 33 hostages. Israel will free hundreds, as you said, of Palestinian prisoners. And I wanted to bring that up, Jeff, because people may see that and go, well, why would Israel do this? And I think what's important to look at is, look, it doesn't feel like a fair deal. Obviously not. It's not going to be a fair deal in terms of negotiating with a terrorist organization. But at least you have 33, like you said, alive or dead, sadly, hostages. And I know that is such a important thing that if you follow anyone on social media that's really engaged, it's every day posting about these hostages still. So I'm sure the pressure was on as well to get something done.
Yeah, look, again, every life is precious. The problem is when you make the rational calculus, is the result of this that the bad guys have now been incentivized to take hostages again. Well, what happens all the time. And therefore, the follow-up to this is more important, which is to say both the violent follow-up, which is to say there will be, I have no doubts, more conflict, but also the peaceful follow-up, which is to say the broader revisiting of the Abraham Accords and the blooming of the Abraham Accords. And part of that is, and the reason that was successful is because it set aside just the lie that Israel is occupying somebody else's territory and the lie that there needs to be some kind of a, quote, Palestinian, unquote, state. No, there doesn't. And Israel's very clear that there doesn't. And this has been pushed by the left and pushed by people who want to see Israel's destruction. And that's not happening in the White House now, we hope. And if Israel remains firm, so we'll see simultaneously, it wasn't that long ago. It was just a few years ago. We saw peace breaking out and normalization breaking out with countries that had opposed Israel from the beginning. And so hopefully we'll see more of that in a positive way. The other thing we'll see is they're saying, again, being reported that among the first tranche of hostages coming out are the Americans still held hostage. And again, it's another symbol of a change of administration. Now, would we like to see all of the hostages out at once? Yes, we would. But again, we have an American president who puts America's interest first. Its allies are important, but the fact that we finally have American hostages being released, hopefully as part of this, is also another sign that there's a new sheriff in town, and that makes a difference to these negotiations.
Let's go ahead and take a phone call related to that matter. Michael's calling in Florida. Michael, you're on the air.
Prayers have been answered with regards to this deal with Israel and Hamas, and I think I know the answer to this, is lame duck Biden actually going to have the gall to take credit for this?
Well, we'll see tonight as he makes his farewell address. I bet it comes up. But of course, in a Reagan-esque move, this was clearly being wrapped up because next week you're going to have a brand new administration that is not going to be near as friendly to Hamas.
That's right. And Michael, yes, I'm certain that the White House will put out a statement that says, we are thrilled that under President Biden's leadership or something to that effect. But one difference in these negotiations than what has tried to have been brokered by Egypt and Qatar over the last year is that there's a new player at the table. And this is the incoming Mideast envoy of President Trump, Steve Witkoff, was there for the negotiations. And this is an article from a more left-of-center Israeli source, but it mentions the tense weekend between Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and incoming Mideast envoy Steve Witkoff led to a breakthrough in the hostage negotiations. And it also says that the top aide to U.S. President-elect Donald Trump did more to sway the premier in a single sit-down than outgoing President Joe Biden did in all of the year. That was from two Arab officials telling that paper. And we'll get into some of the nuance of this as well, because yes, Hamas wasn't necessarily willing to really come to the table either over the course of this last year. Now they know there's a new sheriff in town and that they've heard the statements President Trump has said about what will happen to them if these hostages aren't released. But whenever you're talking about a ceasefire in war and with a terrorist organization, we can celebrate that hostages will be coming home, but we still grieve for the thousands that were killed and the hostages that were taken and killed in captivity and those on October 7th. And we also know that this war will never truly end, no matter what ceasefire, what piece of paper is signed, until the radical jihadist terror organization Hamas ceases to exist.
And that was the goal of Netanyahu, was to just end Hamas in general. Does it look like that's what's going to happen? Doesn't look like it. That right now, I mean, again, that could still happen, but that's not the deal that's struck right now. And that's maybe an unfortunate fact, but there is a sigh of relief, I hope. I'm looking at live footage right now from Tel Aviv as there are celebrations. Because look, even you got to remember, these people, whether you agree with this ceasefire deal or not, they're the ones living it. These are real people with real families and schools and restaurants and businesses that have been so impacted by this war, where airlines won't fly into your country, where tourism is such a huge portion of the economy that's running in Israel, has essentially been shut down and maybe gets to reopen this summer. And that would be a big moment for a lot of people to be able to return back to Israel, as so many trips were canceled, delayed, as we saw, obviously, this real war. Remember, this was real wartime, on the ground. And again, remember how small Israel is. It would be like someone in your neighboring county being in war and all of your friends and family being involved in it. So right now, I do want to say at least there is that moment of relief.